Hi, let's learn Disney Space Mountain game, All Systems Go. A 2 to 4 player game by Chris Leader and Kevin Rogers, with illustration by Eric Hibbler, published by Ravensburger. The active player rolls the navigation dice to determine how everyone's rockets move and how much fuel, if any, is used. Once all movement and any encounters are resolved, each player must decide if they want to stop, refuel, or keep going. All systems go. Players who decide to stop will keep their missions safe. If the fuel gauge ever drops to 1, all players who are still active have to reset their missions. Once everyone stops, or the fuel gauge hits 1, the dice launcher, navigation dice, and fuel gauge move to the player on the left. They become the new active player and start a new round. The goal of the game is to be the first player to visit all 5 starports and complete all 5 mission cards. To set up the game, let's start by placing the galaxy board in the middle of the play area. Next, set up the Space Mountain Dice Launcher. When that's set up, place it next to the game board. Then take the navigation dice and place those next to the dice launcher. Next, assemble the fuel gauge. Then take the red fuel gauge clip and place that at 6 on the fuel gauge. Place that next to the game board as well. Next, take the mission markers and place them by the board. And it's an optional step, but if you wish to use them, build the 5 starports and place them on the 5 starport icons. It is not necessary to use them. Next, mix up the encounter tokens and place one face down on each empty encounter token space on the galaxy board. Each player chooses a rocket. Let's set up a 3-player game. Place the rocket on the starport icon of the matching color. Throughout gameplay, rockets must face one of 4 directions, no diagonals. And this includes while at the spaceport. Separate mission cards by letter, A through E, and shuffle each set individually. Then deal out 1 card from each set to each player. And each player places the cards face up in front of them in alphabetical order. Each player takes a starport token of every color and places those in front of them, being sure the one of their matching color is on the approved for travel side and the remainder are on the welcome to Space Mountain side. Return any unused items to the box. They will not be used this game. The first player is the person who most recently rode Space Mountain. If there is a tie, the youngest player goes first. The person who will be first player gets the Space Mountain Dice Launcher, the 3 navigation dice, and the fuel gauge. The player who has these is called the active player. During a round, players will plan their turn, roll navigation dice, check for fuel, and move rockets. And a round loops through these steps over and over until either all players have chosen to refuel or the fuel gauge reaches 1. During the plan your turn part of the round, the active player asks everyone else whether they wish to continue, all systems go, or stop, refuel. Each player, including the active player, must declare their intentions out loud. Any player who wishes to refuel removes the rocket ship from the galaxy board and places it by their mission cards. Mission markers are no longer in danger of the fuel gauge reaching 1, but they can't go again until a new round starts. It is at refueling that players flip over mission cards. Simply return the markers to the marker pool and flip over the card. But cards must be completed in alphabetical order. So in this example, C cannot be flipped over until B has been completed first. But any players who choose all systems go are ready for step 2. Step 2 is roll navigation dice by dropping them in the dice launcher. For every orange rolled, move the fuel gauge down 1. So be careful, because when the fuel gauge reaches 1, any cards that are still face up that have mission markers get those markers removed. But the markers of anyone who had already stopped to refuel are safe, as are any already completed missions. Now finally, it is time for all the rockets to move simultaneously according to the dice, starting at the bottom of the dice launcher and working your way up. And we have two symbols that the dice could be. This symbol means to move your rocket forward 2 spaces. And this symbol means to turn. And colors have no significance during movement. To turn, rocket ships move forward 1 space, turn, and move forward another space. And players are able to occupy the same space. If players encounter a cosmic event, they must stop movement and resolve the encounter. They would then move on to resolving the next die. Tokens start the game face down, but when a player encounters one, it gets turned face up. And when the player moves away from that, it remains face up, so other players know what they will be encountering. When a player encounters a space item, place a mission marker on that matching image, or any question mark symbol. And you will likely want to complete the leftmost card first. When a player encounters an any item, you may choose to place a mission marker on any uncovered space on your cards. When a player encounters a space with return to starport, the player returns their rocket to a starport that matches one of their tokens that is flipped over to the approved for travel side. And while doing so, they can orient their ship any way they wish. When a player encounters a wormhole, transport your rocket through the tunnel to the other side and orient your rocket any way you wish. Then continue on to the movement of the next die. When a rocket runs to the edge of the board, stop the die movement and place the rocket on the other side of the board in the same row or column facing the center of the board. Then continue with the next die in the dice launcher. When a rocket enters a starport space, the player flips over their token that matches that color. That player can now move here if they encounter return to starport or when starting a new round. The round ends either when all players have decided to refuel or the fuel gauge reaches 1. And in either event, reset the fuel gauge to 6, and each player places their rocket on any starport that matches one of their approved for travel tokens, facing any direction they wish. The current active player then passes the dice launcher, and fuel gauge to the next player clockwise to start a new round. The first player to visit all 5 starports and complete all 5 of their mission cards is the winner. If 2 or more players are successful on the same turn, the player closest to the active player clockwise wins. Before we go, here are some alternate rules to make the game faster or to help you play with younger children. In the Only Missions variant, players would only complete missions and not visit starports. You would set the game up as normal without handing out starport tokens. To make the game even faster, play with 4 or even 3 missions. The first player to complete their missions wins. For the Known Space variant, try placing the encounter tokens randomly face up on the board. Thank you for joining me to learn Disney Space Mountain Game, All Systems Go. I invite you to join me next time as I do a playthrough.